Hello, Connor. I hope you're doing well. I took a look at your research design, and first of all, I'd like to say that I'm no expert on real estate, particularly real estate in the US, especially malls. So I had to look a lot of the information on it before I could even do this review. But perhaps for your further research, I would like to make a suggestion, especially for people like me who don't have the technical knowledge, that you could define a little bit more on your research project. What do you mean by retail apocalypse, and what are the specific characteristics for regional, sub-regional malls that you're looking at? Um, First of all, I would like to say that I think this project has a long way of practical applicability, and I think it's very interesting how connected you are to the sector and how experienced you are in the field with the overall purpose of this project and the overall pragmatic use that can be given to it, especially by companies, that manage malls and companies that you're already familiar with. I think it's very great that you already have the database, access to a database, or the company who has that database for all this information. I think it's going to go a long way in simplifying your research and your data collection. I do have a couple of doubts. My first doubt is a little bit about how do all these different data collection techniques that you mentioned will interact with each other for the final analysis. So you mentioned that you're going to do case studies for some companies, and you're going to do surveys, and that you're going to go straight for primary data collection from the database. While I understand that all these are great sources of information, perhaps in your research design in your final research, you could expand more on how these types of data sets collected from different places are going to interact with each other, and how are they going to serve the final objective of the purpose for your research. For example, in particular, case studies, I'm not particularly sure how they fit in with the larger spectrum of what you're trying to do, but I think it's great if you're looking to explain the phenomenon. So my recommendation would be, if you're going to try to explain why some malls can handle better the retail apocalypse, could handle better the retail apocalypse than other types of malls, perhaps focusing on only on one part, whether it be the reasons for why these malls can endure, or for the quantitative mean of what percentage of malls are considered dead malls, and what are the time frame for these malls to be considered dead malls. Also, I think I'm not particularly sure if this is one of the requirements for this particular class, but I think it's worth mentioning that I'm not very sure where you add in a lot of international business, because it does seem like it's mostly a national study by national companies operating within the domestic market of the US. I'm not sure if that's a requirement or not, but perhaps I think it was worth mentioning. I think that because this project has a lot of practical applicability, I would like to understand more, and I understand that in 2 pages it's very difficult to do so. But in your final project, you could expand more on the methodology of how you're going to process that analysis and that information, and how that analysis is going to lead to the particular conclusions that you're looking at. Because you do mention the conclusions, but I'm not sure what your main point is. Understanding, the occupancy rates of malls, or what malls have really low occupancy rates and have because they're dead, and how it happened, and during that time frame, if all you want is the information on what malls are not working, or if you're looking to really go very deep into why these malls are failing, because I think if you're going to go very deep into why these malls are failing, you're going to have a lot of problems when it comes to the applicability of the research, because you're going for such a large scope. And what I like about the project and about your research is that its applicability, it's very, very significant. And I'm sure a lot of companies are going to be very interested in understanding this. But I think if you narrow your focus to either one of those things that I mentioned, whether it be the quantitative assessment of how malls have been doing over the past few years, or the deeper understanding of how these malls have managed to survive, or how these malls have gone broke over the past few years, you can do a great job in increasing the applicability of the project. Hope you do a great job in your project.